If you're a landscape photographer and you want to improve your photos, there's a technique I'd suggest you use. It's called light sculpting, and I use it with nearly all of my landscape photography when editing in Photoshop. It's based on the traditional darkroom technique of dodging and burning, which I use to add light to areas of the photo. But there's a few tricks that you need to know in order to make this work well. Let's start with this landscape photo. I shot it at Derwent Water in the Lake District, and I exposed it for the highlights because I didn't have any filters with me at the time. This was to prevent the bright areas of the sky in the image from burning out and becoming too bright. As a result, the rest of the image looks like it's too dark, and the details like the boats in the foreground just become lost in the shadows. This is an ideal photo for using the light sculpting technique to add light and open the shadows. Let's start with the basic example of adding light using a traditional dodging layer. I'll then explain how to improve your results, but first there's something you need to see. I'll start by adding a new empty layer to the image by clicking the new layer icon at the bottom of the layers panel. This creates the new layer, adding it to the top of the image layers. Next, set the blend mode for the layer to be overlay. You can do this by selecting the layer and then clicking the blend mode drop down. I'll explain why shortly. I can then choose the brush tool from the Photoshop Tools palette. Now using white paint, I can begin to paint over the areas I want to highlight. As I do this, you can see them becoming lighter. This is because the overlay blend mode that we're using causes these areas where we paint with white to become brighter. You can also use this blend mode with black paint to make them darker. Now, there's another blend mode that's similar to overlay, which is called soft light. This does very much the same thing as the overlay, except it doesn't lighten the brightest areas quite as much. You can see this if you watch the highlights when I change the layers blend mode from overlay to soft light. Unfortunately, the soft light blend mode has a much stronger effect on the shadows and now makes them look dreadful. This is a typical problem when dodging and burning using the technique I've just demonstrated. The way to solve this and to achieve a professional result is by targeting your adjustments onto specific tones in the image. For example, if I want to show more detail in the shadow areas, we can create a selection based on the shadows and use that to paint through. Let's delete this layer now and I'll show you the technique in detail. As before, add a new empty adjustment layer to the image and set the blend mode to be overlay. We then want to select the dark pixels in the image, but not the brightest. To do this, we first need to select the luminosity information of the image, in other words, how bright each pixel is. It may sound complicated, but we can do it very easily with a keyboard shortcut in the Channels panel. After selecting the Channels window, hold down the Command key, or if you're using a Windows PC, that's the Alt key. Now whilst holding this down, we see the mouse pointer change to show a dotted rectangle. When you see this, it means that if you click on a channel, it will load the luminance for that channel as a selection. We then see the marching ants appear, indicating the selected area of the image. The next step is to invert this selection in order to select the darkest areas. You do this using the Photoshop Select menu and choosing the inverse option. The final step before painting is to hide the marching ants because they just get in the way and stop you seeing what's happening. To hide them, go to the View menu and in the Show submenu, turn off the Select Edges option. This hides the marching ants but leaves the selection in place. Now when I paint on the layer, it affects the darker areas of the image more, making them lighter. And because we're using the overlay blend mode, it helps to keep the adjustment looking natural. If I change the blend mode to soft light, it just makes the shadows look dull and flat in comparison. Now let's add another empty layer to the image and set the blend mode to soft light. Although soft light doesn't look good for the shadows, it does look much better for the highlights, as you'll see. I'll then load the image luminance information as a selection like before. Going back to the Channels window, hold down the Command or Alt key and then click on the channel to load. This time, as we're going to be painting the highlights to make them brighter, we don't need to invert the selection. Instead, we'll simply hide the marching ants using the View menu. I can then paint over the areas of the image where I want to emphasize the light. And because I'm painting through a selection, I don't need to worry about affecting the shadows too much. If I now hide the two layers that I've used to add the light to my image, you can see that they make a huge difference. This is one way professional photographers use to improve their landscape photography. But there's another technique we can use for even better results. You see, there's a problem with the layer that I've used to lighten the highlights. Watch carefully while I turn the layer off and on. You can see that it makes the highlights appear washed out and lacking colour. This is because I've made them too bright. What I should have done is emphasize the brighter areas of the mid-tones, but not the brightest areas of the image. Let's hide this layer and add another one because I want to show you a better way of sculpting light. After adding the layer, I'll set its blend mode to soft light just as I did before. But this time, rather than loading the luminosity selection from the image, I'm going to use a third-party extension panel for Photoshop. This one is called Luminosity, which was developed and is sold by Greg Benz. If you look at my side panel in Photoshop, you can see a couple more panels that I use which are Raya Pro and TK Actions. I'll include the details of these in the YouTube video description. Using Luminosity, I'm going to click on the M button to select the midtones in the image. You can now see a mask where the darkest and lightest areas of the image are dark, but the midtones are shown lighter. This allows me to target my light sculpting onto the midtones of the image. I can also refine the mask using the slider on the side of the panel if I need to. When I'm happy the areas I want to target are shown as light grey in the mask, I can click the Cell button. This loads the luminosity mask as a selection. Another nice feature is that it also hides the marching ants automatically. Now I can paint over the boats and the other areas where I want to make the midtones lighter. What's nice about using the luminosity mask to target tones in this way is that it keeps the adjustments looking very natural. Now we've covered a lot of information in this short video, but there's still a lot more you can do with luminosity mask. If you want to develop your skills in this area further, I'll include a link to my Photoshop Luminosity Masking book in the YouTube video description. When the light sculpting is done, I'll usually finish my image using one of my favourite tools in the Nik collection. If you want to know more about my preferred landscape adjustments using Nik, watch this video next. Thanks for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon for another video.